All right, so welcome everyone to Rise 2022. I'm Parul Dhir. I'm a director with Human Resources with Acuity Knowledge Partners. I lead diversity and inclusion efforts at Acuity. I'm a psychologist by qualification, and with over 16 years of experience, industry experience, I have worked in areas of employee engagement, reward and recognition, diversity and inclusion, employee relations, employee volunteering, and analytics. DNI happens to be an area and a cause that I'm very passionate about. Glad to be here.
Hi everyone, welcome to Rise 2022. I think firstly, thanks a lot for having me here. I'm very excited to do this. Right? Very excited to talk to all of you and the panelists here. So my name is Aayan. I work with an organization called Cactus Communications. Currently, I play the role of product head at the R&D cell of Cactus, which is called Cactus Labs. And prior to this, I started my career with customer service as a customer service representative and then moved up to manage that particular team. I also have experience with leading teams across various different functions like customer service, customer experience, software development, product, etc. I've been with Cactus, which is my first organization for about 16 years. And I'm, I think, one of the few people in the org right now who is out and queer. Um, yeah.
Thanks, Ayan. Ani?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Ani. I'm a fourth year student at BITS Pilani. I'm majoring in computer science. I'm also part of the organization Anchor, which is a BITS Pilani gender and sexuality cell working towards inclusivity on its campuses. I'm really glad to be here.
Really glad to have both of you here. Well, I'm a loud and proud ally. My introduction to the community was during my college days. Hailing from a small town, I saw exclusion from a close quarter until my senior, who happened to be from the community, really decided to save me from all the pranks and taunts and be my guardian angel. We became great friends, and over the years, I have known her. I have known the community. I have a lot of friends from the community. I know the struggles, the frustrations, and and I'm all for inclusion. Um, this is something which is very close to my heart. I know the pain of exclusion because I've faced it firsthand, and I know how much what is the joy of inclusion and how important it is. Um, just talking about the organization that I come from at Acuity, we are blessed to have very inclusive mindset right from the top. We've been very sensitive and cautious, and we took our a lot of time in just understanding more about the community, to be more informed about the community while we were thinking of building a congenial atmosphere and an ecosystem. Training for people managers, creating platforms to normalize conversations around the community, finding leadership, sponsorship. So all of this, led to the launch of our ally network, Prism, and uh, and and now we have about 100 network members. Today, we have policies and benefits that cover same-sex partners and parents of all genders. We are proud of where we are today, but we do understand there is a long way to go, and we're very enthusiastic and hungry to make the organization more and more inclusive by every passing day. Now, I have a question, for you, Ayan, as an ally, as well as DNI enthusiast. I think coming out is a very sensitive and a very important milestone. I would want you to share, with our participants today, your journey of self-realization and coming out at the workplace.
Thanks so much, Parul. Um, so I realized at a really young age that I didn't fit in and that I was different. And this feeling of not belonging or being excluded, not necessarily explicitly but implicitly, right? So I've lived with that for a really long time. So when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I knew I was different in the sense that that's typically the age where most, straight people, heterosexual people will start to have crushes on the opposite gender, right, or on the opposite sex. And I realized that I wasn't having those kind of feelings, and that's I was having, say, crushes on my teachers or my classmates who were girls, and we were in a co-ed school, which is good, which is great. And that's when I started to realize that maybe I am different. And this is back in so this is back in the like late 90s and early 20s. That's when I was in my teenage years. By the time I was 14, 15, I was in my first relationship with somebody from my class, and it was a same-sex relationship. And I kind of felt like I need to put a label on this, or I need to put a label on me. And at that time, there were only three things that you could be, and even that was like a big deal, right? So you could either be gay, or you could be straight, or you could be bisexual. And I wanted to kind of define myself because that's what other people were doing. And so I figured that, hey, you know what, I must be gay because I am having these feelings and I'm in this relationship. So hey, I must be gay. And I didn't really like come out or anything like that at that point in time because I was still trying to figure things out myself. Um, and but I did tell a few really close friends that this is what it is, and thankfully that went okay. That went all right in the sense that most people were like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like it doesn't really make a difference. And then I kind of lived with that identity for a long time. I lived through that, like through most of my 20s until my early 30s. I actually lived through that. What was though happening is that I've always been really uncomfortable using the word lesbian to describe myself. I've always been really uncomfortable whenever anyone kind of refers to me in the feminine. This is something that I always knew, but I didn't really have the words to kind of explain that, right? So even though I would say that I'm queer, I would never use the word lesbian. I would say I'm gay, right? Because I was subconsciously wanting to use a more wider kind of term, right? And through my 20s, my dysphoria started to really kind of play out a lot, and it played out in various different ways, right? So it was only about maybe 2 years ago or so that I actually came to the realization that I don't identify as a woman, and I primarily identify as male, but not fully, right? So I chose to say that, okay, I'm trans. At that point of time, I chose to say that I'm trans. And at this point of time, if you ask me, I'll say that I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I'm probably non-binary, trying to figure it out still. Um, for me, coming out as transgender or as non-binary came after a lot of introspection, came after a lot of pain, because at that point of time, really nothing was going right in my life, and I was depressed. I didn't know whom to ask really for help. I had isolated all of my friends, all of my colleagues. I wasn't talking to anybody, and I was still trying to hold down like an executive level job, which I did, and I did hold that job down. Right. So no one really knew what was really going on with me. I myself started to do like a lot of reading online and started to follow a lot of different accounts on social media. And that was a time when people were starting to talk about the movement, and it was really kind of picking up. And there was a lot of conversation happening around gender, and that's really kind of what forced me to introspect a lot about who am I today. Maybe this was a label that I identified with when I was a teenager, but today, who really am I? And so the realization for me that, okay, you are trans or you're non-binary was actually life-saving, because as soon as I realized that, I figured why uh, why I was in so much pain and why there was so much suffering. And then the question was that, okay, should I now keep this to myself again? Should I just adopt like a don't ask, don't tell policy, which is what I had done in the past? Or should I be open about it? And I realized that gender is very different from sexuality, because sexuality is between two people, right? It's about who you are. Say, for example, you can still choose to not come out, but you can't not come out about your gender. You can't not come out about your gender identity. You have to come out about your gender identity, because otherwise everyone's going to misgender you. Everyone's going to assume things. And also by that point of time, I was kind of, I was done. Like I was done living in the shadows. I was done trying to hide parts of myself. I was just done with that because that had done so much damage to me. So I came out to, my mom, and then my brother and my dad, and some really close friends. Each of those experiences was different. My brother was really supportive, and he got it like from the get go. My parents actually still don't understand what it is that I'm talking about, and they are tolerant but not really supportive, in the sense that they let me be and they let me do what it is that I want to do, but they don't really support me, or they don't really use the right pronouns, or they still like use my dead name and things like that. Um, and what I've learned from talking to other people in the queer community is that that's very common, and it takes a lot of time, if at all, for that to change. So that experience was painful yet liberating. Uh, and my friends only have been a huge source of support for me, and they're the ones who really kind of accepted and understood my journey, and have kind of stood behind me. I decided to come out like to everybody that I knew in an Instagram post, mainly because I didn't want to keep having the same conversation over and over again. I wanted to just get it out of the way. And in retrospect, like I realized that that's a lot. It's a lot to do, and it's a lot to kind of take, right? So a lot of people were surprised that I chose to kind of do that on Instagram, but I'm glad that I did. So it's a 3-post series, and whatever 300 people on Instagram. I just decided to do it Pride Month actually last year, and that went really well. Again, it went fantastic. I wasn't expecting that much understanding, that much love, that much support, that much relatability, right? Other people relate to the story as well without being queer. It's like you said, right? Your friend was queer, but she understood what exclusion felt like. And so that for me was really eye-opening. It went much better than I expected it to go. I also decided to come out at work because I didn't want to have a dual identity or a double identity, or I didn't want to hide who I was at work. Also, because I've been at the same place for so long, people have seen me grow and evolve, and I have seen the organization grow and evolve. And I felt like it would be a safe space that would be able to kind of, support me. And I also really wanted to change things for the better for, the new generation that's going to join our workplace. So again, I decided to come out at work. I did it over an email. That email went to about 150, 200 people, because most of the organization knows me, right? And HR helped me draft it. In fact, Pride Circle helped us figure out how I should come out. And really, that's been the trigger for Cactus to change the way that they approach their BNI policy as far as queer inclusion and LGBTQ inclusion goes.
Thanks, Ayan, for sharing the story. I think it brought out what are the struggles of really discovering yourself. Now, I would like to go to Ani, and what has your journey been like of self-realization and coming out?
So, like, while Ayan was talking, I kind of realized how similar our stories were, but that mine, I think, was accelerated version of that, I suppose, to an extent. So yeah, I think I relate to the idea that I don't feel that I've ever had any confusion about who I am. Like I feel like I've always known that it was about having the vocabulary and the language to describe that to other people. So, things that I've said like in the past that kind of come back to me that like even at like 9 years old, I would say, yeah, I'm not a girl. Like that's just, I'm just not. Like it's not a political statement. It's just, yeah, I'm just not. Things like that. But I relate to I am in the sense that I first realized that I wasn't interested in being with men, which was something that later changed. But at the time, it was that I wasn't interested in being with men, and that I started having feelings towards women, and that I started dating someone who was of the same sex, at least. And that entire environment sort of led me to the queer community. And because this is much further, I guess, in the queer movement, I did have access to a lot of the digital landscape that was present, that had a lot of information about the queer community that was able to give me the language and vocabulary so that I could talk about other things like gender, like sexual fluidity, stuff like that, and help me understand things in a very different way. So yeah, like I initially had no thoughts on sexuality, on gender, on anything. At a certain point, I realized that I did like women, and I was not okay with that. At this point, I didn't even communicate it to anyone else. I was just like, no, that's not. Wait, that's not what it's supposed to be. And realizing that I was not okay with being feminine in the way that I was expected to. So, I say that most of the homophobia and transphobia I faced in my life was mostly from myself. It was from my own suppression of identity. And that sort of continued. And I forced myself into this more hyper feminine role that I didn't necessarily want to be in. And that continued till I was around 15, which at one point that snapped. And I can point to one exact moment. And it was, at a very dark time in my life where I was facing other mental health challenges and similar things. So I sort of came to this realization that I don't need to make things more difficult for myself, you know, that I don't need to put a label on it. I don't need to know everything for sure. I can just say, hey, this is what I want to do. I can move one step at a time. And for me, that started with just like cutting my hair off and telling people not to call me by my dead name, dressing the way I wanted to dress, carrying myself the way I want to carry myself, things like that, that aren't necessarily announcements of gender, of sexuality, but just made me feel so much more comfortable in the space that I was inhabiting at the time. So that was just a really interesting experience. Unfortunately, I think because of the outside environment that I was in, I wasn't able to really come out properly. Um, I've never had that experience where I like sit someone down and say, this is who I am. It's just like, I just mentioned, yeah, I'm dating a girl. What does that mean? I don't know. You figure that out. I felt that there was a lot of pressure around finding a label, and I didn't like that pressure. So at a certain point, I just let go of that. And I thought, why am I wasting so much brain space on finding a label that's ultimately for someone else? I don't feel the need to have that. So I'll just say these are the pronouns that you use, these are the words that you can use. Everything else, no one's business, just how I want to exist. And I'm sort of continuing with that mindset as of now. I don't know if in the future I want to pick a label. If I do, that's great. If I don't, I think that's also okay. Um, yeah, with regards to gender and sexuality, I think that's how I'm going about it. I'm going one step at a time and changing whatever it is that makes me more comfortable being myself.
Me, just so much wisdom in what you said, right? Just so much of amazing wisdom, and I think just the courage to say that I don't want to put a label on it, and it's not your business. I think that's just so amazing, and to have that like right now where you are is just amazing. I think.
I think that's something that's really great about, since we're talking about generational things, about my generation in particular, is that every term is expanding. What man means, what woman means, everything is expanding. So we both have an abundance of labels that you can see, vocabulary that you can use, affirmative language that you can use. but also you have the freedom to say, let go of everything. I just want to exist. And that at least online, there's a space where you can do that. That I think is something that helps queer people the most in that sort of situation.
It's also kind of, where, in terms of your story, you were trying to find that label. And I think it's about generations, right? I think it's really, this actually really brought that out, that we are okay with not having a label, and it's okay to not just be defined by any particular boundary, or something which has been defined by society, or our elders, or whoever. I think this generation is much more at ease and just being in the flow.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that is really so commendable, and I think that is something that we really need to learn. So yeah, my next question to both of you is actually, ecosystems play a lot of a big important part in our lives, and do you think the ropes around the ecosystems with regard to acceptance has changed when we talk about family or workplace or society at large?
You should go first. I can go after that.
Sure. I mean, I think it absolutely has changed, like even in my lifetime, which admittedly is not that long, but like I can tell the difference at least pre Section 377 and post Section 377 being removed. There was just such a huge boom of acceptance. I can tell representations in the media and how that has changed the perspective of people around me, the sort of discussions that are being had, which I think is the most important thing. I think, you know, the environment and how it treats you is one of the most important factors, not just on how an ally or how a straight person sees queer people, but how queer people see themselves, right? How they feel about themselves is based on really how society treats them and what society tells them is okay or not okay. So, I've talked about this before in the sense that the internet played a really big role for me because initially, at least when I was in school, we weren't having these discussions at home. The discussions that we were having at school were either negative, I wasn't hearing any affirmative things about queer people or the queer community, or they just weren't being had at all, right? So, because of that, the internet created like a different space for me where I was able to go here and suddenly, people were talking about this. Suddenly, I could be transported to California where there's a pride parade and people are saying, yes, this is okay, this is allowed. And so that sort of dual environment was really important for me personally. Later, after that, one thing I noticed about Section 377 removed for my family personally, like my mom knew that I was queer before that, for around a year and a half before that. And, she's never been homophobic. She has never been transphobic. She's never been bigoted in any way. But the sort of pressure that was surrounding that discussion was not hate, it was just fear, that she was really scared of what that meant for me, what that meant for my life. And she didn't want to, quote unquote, encourage it at the time. But I think when the discussions became more mainstream and when she realized that, oh no, you can have a perfectly happy life while also being queer, or you can have a safe life while also being queer, that helped so much. So, it's not just the home environment, it's not just the personal environment, it's also the political environment around, it's also the environment of the community that directly surrounds you. Coming to college was completely different for me, and it changed so much about how I see myself. So, yeah. Ayan, do you want to go?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, a lot of things that they said resonate with me. Um, so I think like one thing that we kind of have to understand, realize that everybody is a product of their environment, or the environment has a massive contribution to who a person is, to their well-being, to how confident they are, to how included they feel. So it's impossible to really, separate the individual from the environment. Um, so when I was growing up, like we had 56 Mbps modems that would be connected to phone lines, And I am the last. My generation is the last of that. We had one leg here and one leg there. So we've seen times without the internet, and then uh, we've seen the internet pervade pretty much everything. So initially, when I was growing up, the environment of acceptance and awareness just simply didn't exist, right? So I've always had to be really, really careful about whom I say what to, at least when I was younger. And also, it is added pressure because you're trying to kind of figure yourself out and you are not sure yourself about you, right? And the experience that you have is just so different, or for me, was so different than what 99.9% other people were having, that often I didn't really feel safe, right? So, say for example, at school, once we were having like a sex ed discussion, and ours was one of the few forward-looking schools that even did a sex ed discussion. So we were doing the sex ed discussion, and they separated the girls and the boys. And that made me very uncomfortable to begin with, because I was like, okay, should I be here or should I be there? Of course, at that time I couldn't articulate it like that, but they separated it. And then the girls talked about, like, I don't know, periods, and then the boys probably talked about condoms. I don't know. But the point is that, like, I kind of stood up in that class and I said that, uh, you know, I like women at that time. So when I was younger, and in my school, there was an environment of greater acceptance. And when I was younger, I was not tainted by what the world thought of me. So I had a lot more courage to say that, this is who I am. Take it or leave it. As I grew older, essentially, right, that got hard, because when you enter the workspace, for instance, it's a big change. It's a massive change from school or college to being at work. And you want to be focused, or I wanted to be focused on my growth, on my career, on people, respecting me, on being able to have that fast growth track. And there were no like ERGs or communities, or I didn't know anybody in my organization who was queer or who was openly queer. So obviously, I kept that hidden, in the sense that if you asked me, I would tell you, but um, I wouldn't put it out there, because I didn't know what you would do with that information, and I didn't want for it to in any way damage my career or damage my prospects. I didn't want for you to treat me differently, whether that's good different or bad different. I just wanted to be treated, the same. So that was the kind of environment then. Uh, at home, unfortunately, like, again, I think it's a generational thing, because my parents are just of that generation that's very fear driven. Like they said, it's basically about fear. They fear for for our safety, and they're just afraid, and they haven't seen a queer person in India being able to live a happy life, right? Um, so, for instance, when I told my mom that I was gay, this is when I was 17 years old. Uh, she uh, she said to me, the first words that she said to me is, "Why would you choose a life of pain for yourself?" Right? And she said, "Don't do it." And I said, "This is not my choice. This is who I am." And she immediately started crying, and that was the only conversation we ever had about it. And then apparently now I know that, because when I came out and I told her about my gender identity, right, that was the next time that we were talking about this. So we didn't speak about this for like 20 years. And it's not, and my parents are very liberal, they're very open, they're very understanding, they're not bigoted, they're not homophobic, they're not transphobic, they're very forward looking, right? But yet, it is not possible to speak, it is not possible to have these conversations, because there is no awareness, and because it is essentially fear driven, of what are people going to think, or what life is my child going to have, how are they going to grow, how are you going to get respect, all of that. And of course, if that
Ayan, I have a
environment
question on
can
that.
change, sorry, of course, if that environment can change, or that is changing, that means that the experience that a queer person has, or a young queer person has, can be completely different, can be completely affirmative, which was not the case for me. Yeah, sorry.
I have a question. Did you ever try your parents, to, probably see another, another set of parents who were more accepting, or, probably there are organizations that also work with parents on acceptance. Did that thought ever come to you, and did you try?
Yeah, I tried. They said they don't want to. I didn't push it.
All right. So Ani, what are your thoughts on how education ecosystem has changed over the years when it comes to LGBT plus inclusion? Considering there's a far larger number of youth coming out confidently.
Hmm. I mean, I think that's kind of interesting because even the statement, there's a large number of youth coming out confidently, is dependent on so many factors, right? The queer community is not a single monolith. There are just so many factors, the class being the major one, race being another one, ethnicity, where you are in the world. All of these things matter. Um, so, like from what I experienced, even in the last 4 years that I've been in college, I remember in my first year, we were in a general biology class. There's a class with around 300 people in it. And the teacher asked, who knows what transgender means? It was part of the discussion. It was sort of regarding something about biology. And he asked, who knows what transgender means? And I remember in the class, 300 people, 4 people raised their hand, myself included. So, like, this idea that everyone is at the same base level is not true. But I think the good thing about our generation is they're so much more open to ideas, right? Not just about LGBTQ plus, about all kinds of different discussions, right? In many different forms. So I think because of that, most people were not bigoted. There were very few people who were actively hateful. Most people just weren't educated, just didn't know. So in the last few years, when my organization Anchor has been active, we've managed to build that number up so much. Just by educating people, just by giving them access to resources where they can learn for themselves, right? And we had like a pride parade recently. We had our institute give like a declaration of solidarity with the queer community. All these really great things that came just by letting people know that we exist, we need support. So I think that that's a really interesting thing, and I think that's something that's changed over the years. At least from my first year to my fourth year. And I can't imagine how much it's changed over the last 10 years and 20 years as well.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so I do think that when you want changes to take place among the youth or among the people who are in an educational institution, it is absolutely necessary for the institution to be involved. We can have student groups doing all kinds of things, but one thing we've noticed is that when you're reaching out to people, you're reaching out only to those people who are already inclined to, right? I can only reach those people. Everyone else who doesn't want to hear it will turn around and walk away. So I think that's why it's really important to have educational institutes either have courses, either have sex education. And I was really impressed that Aayan School had sex education. Mine did not. And we've been trying to work towards having it in our educational institution. And even that has been an absolute nightmare trying to navigate. So, having these sort of things, having access to the information and the resources that they need, even to just educate themselves, having safe spaces where they can ask questions and not be scared of what response they're going to get. All these things are incredibly important, I think. And they can make the environment just so much better for so many people, not just queer people, just straight people who want to know more, who want to understand more about themselves and about other people. It opens the floor for so many more discussions, that can be helpful to so many people. So yeah, that's my take on that.
Right. Talking of safe spaces, Ayan, what is your thought on how, what are the signs and anchors of a safe space?
I mean, I think that a safe space is a space that allows everybody to be themselves, irrespective of of course, whether you're queer or not queer, how where you're from, race, ethnicity, age, all of that. If your workspace allows a person to be themselves, whoever they are at that point of time in their life, right? Then that is what would be a safe space. Now the thing is that that's hard. It's hard to measure, right? And it's hard to kind of put processes and systems around, because that's how organizations typically work. They'll put a system around it, or they'll put a metric to measure things like this, right? And that's where it gets tricky, right? So I would say that one is, if it's an organization, um, the organization needs to have a culture of listening and really a culture of acceptance. So you need to kind of listen to your employees and what they're saying, and you need to have those systems and those processes in place, whether that's a survey, or whether that's a one-on-one, or whether that's a forum, or whether it's an open house, or whether it's an anonymous tip box, whatever that is, that needs to be there. That's the first thing, because often people are not going to talk about tricky or sticky things or issues. It's not going to come up. It is going to be buried under the carpet, no matter how healthy your culture is. The other thing again is about just being inclusive with regards to diversity, and so diversity of again of thought, of functioning, of perspective, right? That's very important. So often I've seen that once a person's perspective changes, or once they are willing to listen to you, they are willing to support you, right? If their perspective remains the same, if you're unable to kind of educate and engage in, say, a debate or a conversation, then no matter how many processes and policies you put in place, on the ground nothing is kind of going to change, right? So I think these are things that I would say safe, from a psychological safety perspective. But there are very simple things that I think, even from a physical safety perspective. So for instance, a lot of organizations have used to at least have things like dress codes. A lot of organizations, I think all organizations have gendered bathrooms, for instance, right? So allowing something as simple, and I think Ani mentioned this earlier, but something as simple as allowing a person to dress the way that they want, or to carry themselves the way they want, and not force a certain dress code, uh, creates a safe space, because it kind of tells the person that, hey, you know what, however you are, whatever your self-expression might be, you are accepted here.
You bring up a very important point. As an HR person, I think this was the first policy that I looked into, and it was just so gendered. It's like male and female. We had like two tables, and we had like all, like ethnic wear here. And so, yeah, and now we are looking at, this is, so the dress code is going to be dress to express. So it's going to be according to your gender identity, gender expression. So I totally hear you. Now I want to understand from Annie. Annie,
Yeah,
what is your expectation, from a workplace?
I think, the question of what is a safe space, I found that I think the root of, you know, what a safe space is really that a space where you don't need to understand the other person to be able to respect them, and to be able to say, okay, this is what you want to do, that's all right. I will support your right to do that. And that goes in all different ways, right? That can be religious, that can be gender related, that can be sexuality related. It really doesn't matter. It's just that there are a lot of experiences within the queer community itself that I would say that I don't understand, but that's okay. You can still be friendly with them, you can still be respectful and affirming of whatever their identity is. I think because of that, when I say that I haven't entered the workspace because I haven't properly, but I've had some experience working in like environments for internships, stuff like that. And I really related to what I answered earlier, where he said that you don't necessarily you only answer, right? If someone asks you about it, then you say it. So I really related to that, and I've sort of described that feeling as being in the closet with the door open, where it's like, everyone can see, but don't ask. Don't. I'm not gonna, go out there and tell everyone about it. So that's not necessarily a great feeling. As of now, I don't know what can be done to combat that, because again, I have all these feelings of I don't want someone to see me differently, whether that's good, whether that's bad, doesn't matter. I also want to tell myself my work has nothing to do with this, but I also understand that my ability to exist comfortably in any environment is dependent on how much people know about me. So I would say, yeah, from an organization, if I was to expect a completely open environment, I think at least something like asking a preferred name or preferred pronouns, stuff like that. Like Ayan said, eliminating dress codes, allowing people to self-define what they want to be called, what they want to be called, what they want to, where they want to sit, what they want to do, like that sort of thing. Like allow self-definition within whatever hierarchies exist. Um, yeah, but I think that's something that has been very troubling for me as a young person who has to enter the workspace now, that I am for the first time moving into a space where someone's opinion of me might actually affect my career, which is terrifying. I think that, all right, if somebody doesn't like how, who or what I am, that could affect, something that is far beyond just a simple opinions or a simple conversation. It could affect what kind of work I get to do, whether I'm included in certain projects. So, that's something that I need to learn how to handle. Right now, I figure I hope I can communicate the point that, how I dress, how I identify, how I speak doesn't affect how well I can code. Hopefully, that's something that will come across, and hopefully in the future that won't have to be a thought that crosses anyone's mind at all.
Now to both of you, your closing thoughts, and just want on what are the few takeaways that our listeners can take back and implement in their organization. What is the multi-gen approach to inclusion? Anything that you would like to share, with changing expectations of LGBT inclusion at the workplace?
Oh, maybe I can go first, right?
Yeah.
I think that one of the things, right, is that, and I think Ani mentioned this earlier, where she said that uh, it's important for the leadership, or the teachers at the institute to support, right? And I think that's very, very important. That would be the top takeaway. That if you want to kind of institute real change or real inclusion in the organization, you have to have the senior leadership spot. You have to have a senior leadership sponsor, and that person can't be the CHRO. That person can't be HR, because HR is not going to be in meetings and decisions and about who gets promoted, about how someone is addressed. HR is not going to be there. It's leadership that's going to be there, and so it's really important for all leaders at all levels to be onboarded. Um, that's I think that's one takeaway that I would say. It's not a change that can happen ground up. It can happen ground up, but I think it's much faster if it happens, top down. It's already happening ground up, and that I think that leads me to my second point, is that the changes that have happened in terms of just understanding of the LGBTQ space, of identities, the striking down of Section 377, the kind of media that we are seeing. There's so much more representation in movies. There's so much more representation on OTT platforms. For instance, like Amazon, Netflix, Prime. I think everyone did like a queer series, right? Which I've never kind of seen before. Uber, for example, I think for the first time in India, changed their cabs to the pride colors. So a lot of changes are already happening. And so young people that come into the organization, they come in with a different mindset and a different expectation. And I think that people who hold power or authority or leadership in organizations, one need to really kind of update themselves and really become aware of how truly the environment has really changed and accelerated so much, maybe in the last 10 years or so. So that's the other takeaway. Educate yourself, educate your teams, educate your team members. It has to kind
There's
of
a need for
start from
continuous
you.
education.
Yeah, continuously. Yeah. The other thing is that, and we debated this a lot, at Cactus, was that one of the debates that we had was that how many queer people are there? Can you put a number on it? Right. And again, that's how decisions are made in organizations. You will need some kind of data. You are going to need some numbers. And so then we kind of have to sit down and say that, look, you're not going to have the data because not everyone's going to be out, right? So you cannot make this decision based on data. Or for example, how many queer people did we hire? Again, that data is not going to be accurate because a lot of people are not going to say that when they're going to join, right? So you have to kind of take a different approach when you are trying to solve this challenge, right? You have to kind of assume that, and we do this in customer service too. So we do this in customer service. It's a noted technique wherein if one customer has a complaint, you know that 10 have a complaint or 10 have the same experience. So similarly, for example, if even if you know that one person in your organization is queer or could be queer, it means that at least 10 more exist. And if one person is entering the workspace and has I think the openness and the courage to say that, look, this is that I belong to the queer community, that means there are probably 10 or 15 more kind of coming in. So I think this kind of thinking, changing the way that we look for metrics and data to make our decisions will help.
Right. Thank you so much, Ayan. Thank you for sharing, your thoughts. Uh, I would like to now, this was a very interesting conversation. Thank you for sharing your life stories, your journeys, of self-realization, of coming out, of what you have done in your capacities in your organizations for LGBTQ inclusion. I think it is very inspiring. And, we all as, allies and as a part of the community, we need to do so much more in the workplace and in the society at large for greater inclusion. So that, all of us bring our authentic selves to work and, just be. If I was to quote Annie, just be.